60 Minutes Rewind.
It's a cliche of courtroom dramas. That moment when the eyewitness is asked, "Do you see the person who committed the crime here in this courtroom before you?" Well, it happens in real courtrooms all the time. And to jurors, that point of the finger by a confident witness is about as damning as evidence can get. But there is one type of evidence that's even more persuasive, and that, of course, is DNA. There have been 233 people exonerated by DNA in this country, and now a stunning pattern has emerged. More than 3/4 of them were sent to prison, at least in part, because an eyewitness pointed a finger, an eyewitness who we now know was wrong. It was hot and humid in Burlington, North Carolina on the night of July 28, 1984. Jennifer Thompson, then a 22-year-old college student, had gone to bed early in her off-campus apartment. As she slept, a man shattered the light bulb near her back door, cut her phone line, and broke in.
I remember kind of waking up and turning my head to the side and saying, "Who's there? Who is it?" And I saw the top of someone's head kind of sliding beside my mattress. And I screamed, and I felt a blade go to my throat.
A knife?
A knife. And he told me to shut up or he was going to kill me.
Her first thought was to offer him anything she had to go away.
"You can have my credit card, you can have my wallet, you can have anything in the apartment, you can have my car." And he looked at me and said, "I don't want your money." And I knew what was getting ready to happen.
She vowed to stay alert and study him so that if she lived, she could help put him away forever.
What is his voice? Does he have an accent? Does he have a scar? Is there a tattoo?
He's raping you and you're studying his
I mean,
face.
it was just trying to pay attention to a detail that if I survived, and that was my plan, I'd be able to help the police catch him.
After about half an hour, Jennifer tricked the rapist into letting her get up and fix him a drink, and she ran out the back door. He fled and raped a second woman half a mile away. Detective Mike Galden met Jennifer at the hospital.
The first comment I remember her making was that, "I'm gonna get this guy that did this to me." She said, "I took the time to look at him. I will be able to identify him if I'm given an opportunity."
Detective Galden worked with Jennifer to make a composite sketch, poring over eyes, noses, ears, lips, trying to recreate the face she had seen that night. The sketch went out, and tips started coming in. One of those tips was about a young man named Ronald Cotton, who worked at a restaurant near the scene of both rapes and had a record, a guilty plea to breaking and entering, and as a teenager to sexual assault. 3 days after the rape, Mike Galden called Jennifer in to do a photo lineup. He laid these 6 pictures down on the table, said the perpetrator may or may not be one of them, and told her to take her time.
Does she say immediately, "That's him"?
No, she studied each photograph.
I can remember almost feeling like I was at an SAT test. You know, we start narrowing down your choices. You can discount A and B and...
Oh, like multiple choice.
Exactly.
According to the police report, Jennifer studied the pictures for 5 minutes.
She picked up Ron's photograph and said, "That's the man that raped me."
And you must have said, "Are you sure?" And she said yes?
Yeah, oh yes, certainly.
Ronald Cotton heard the news from his mother's boyfriend.
He told me, he said, "Ron," he said, "the police are looking for you." And I said, "For what?" He told me, "For rape." I said, "Man, I didn't commit such a crime like that."
Did you panic?
I didn't panic. I'm trying to figure out, why.
He comes in and gives me a very detailed account of where he was, who he was with that night. As it turns out, that was a false alibi.
I realized later that I had got my weekends confused, and so therefore I gave them the reason to think that I was lying.
This was August 1st, 1984.
Right.
You go in to clear yourself. When did you actually leave?
I didn't.
He was locked up and days later put in a physical lineup.
I'm number 5.
You scared?
I was very scared, nervous. I was so nervous. I was trembling. I felt my body just shaking.
They were asked to step forward, speak, and step back.
I can remember looking to the detective and saying, it's between 4 and 5, can I have them do it again?
And then she knew it was number 5, Ronald Cotton.
Did you feel absolutely certain?
Absolutely certain.
Did anybody say to you, good job?
Well, what was said to me afterwards was, that's the same person you picked out in the photo lineup. So in my mind, I thought, bingo, I did it right. I did it right.
In a week-long trial, the jury heard about Ronald Cotton's faulty alibi, his clothing that matched Jennifer's description, and a piece of foam found on her floor that seemed to come from one of his shoes. And most powerfully, they heard from Jennifer.
When they ask you, do you recognize the man who did this to you? Did you point to him? It was
Absolutely.
Ron Cotton.
It was Ronald Cotton.
She called my name, pointing a finger, and that's all it takes, it seemed like.
What did that feel like?
It felt like someone pushing a knife through me.
It took the jury just 40 minutes. The verdict, guilty on all counts.
He was sentenced to life and 50 years. And it was for me that moment that you know the justice system works. Because I am the victim, and he's a horrible person, and he will never, ever be free again.
Ronald Cotton was handcuffed, shackled, and taken to North Carolina's Central Prison. He was 22 years old.
You know, they say grown men doesn't cry, but it's a lie. You know, I grabbed my pillow many times and hugged it, wishing I was hugging my mom, my dad, sister, brother. I wish it didn't have to be this way.
He started working in the prison kitchen, singing in the choir, and writing letter after letter to his attorneys, hoping to get a new trial. Then one day, as he watched a new inmate being brought in, he had a strange feeling.
I said, excuse me. I said, you look familiar. I said, where are you from? He said, I'm from Burlington. I said, I am too. I said, you kind of resemble the drawing of a suspect in a crime of which I'm falsely in prison for. Did you commit this crime? And he told me, no, he did not.
Wait a sec, you saw him and thought of that composite drawing?
Mm-hmm.
His name was Bobby Poole, and he was in for rape. He started working in the prison kitchen, too.
And the stewardess were calling me Poole instead of Cotton.
They were calling you by his name?
Yes.
In other words, people were mistaking the two of you.
Yes, exactly.
Then a fellow inmate told him that he'd heard Bobby Poole admit to raping Jennifer and the other woman that night. Ronald Cotton won a new trial, and his lawyers called Bobby Poole to the stand with Jennifer sitting right there. It was the moment Ronald Cotton had been hoping for.
Bobby Poole is in the courtroom. You look over there. What happens inside you?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. As a matter of fact, the strongest emotion I felt was anger at the defense. Because I thought, how dare you? How dare you question me? How dare you try to paint me as someone who could possibly have forgotten what my rapist looked like? I mean, the one person you would never forget? How dare you?
Ronald Cotton was convicted again, this time given 2 life sentences. Back in prison 7 years later, he and everyone else was riveted by a big news story, the trial of O.J. Simpson.
I would get my radio, put my earplugs, and go outside, sit in a corner.
And listen to the trial.
Yes.
He was intrigued by something he had never heard of, DNA. He wrote to his new attorney, law professor Rich Rosen. Rosen warned him that there probably wasn't any evidence left to test, and if there was, DNA could cut both ways.
Understand, if the DNA comes back and shows that you did this crime, whatever legal issues we have don't make any bit of difference. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison.
He warned you that if it comes up positive, you're sunk.
I told him to put his foot down and go with it.
Packed away on the shelves of the Burlington Police Department was 10-year-old evidence from the 2 rapes that night. Inside one of the rape kits was a fragment of a single sperm with viable DNA. It proved what Ronald Cotton had been saying all along. He was innocent, and the rapist was Bobby Poole. Within days, Ronald Cotton was back in court.
You are walking out here today as a free man.
This time to be released.
So not only do you find out that Ron didn't do the crime. You find out Bobby Poole did.
It was just utter shock, really, disbelief. I mean, by this time, this is 11 years later. And, you know, I know that I've been involved in a case of a man's lost 11 years of his life. And I was so sad for him and his family.
In the years since Ronald Cotton's conviction, Jennifer had married and had children.
Are you the one that tells her?
Yes. Her reaction, no, it can't be true. It's not possible, you know. I know Ronald Cotton raped me. There's no question in my mind.
It was like someone had just taken my life and like turned it upside down.
She cried?
Oh, she cried. She broke down. I mean, she took it all on herself. You know, the guilt. You know, I did this to that man.
Shame?
Shame, terrible shame. Suffocating, debilitating shame.
But when she thought or dreamed about that night, it was still Ronald Cotton's face she saw. To get past it, she asked if he would meet with her at a local church.
I remember him walking into the church, and I physically could not stand up.
She was nervous, scared.
I started to cry immediately, and I looked at him and I said, Ron, if I spent every second of every minute, every hour for the rest of my life telling you how sorry I am, it wouldn't come close to how my heart feels. I'm so sorry. And Ronald just leaned down, he took my hands.
Oh, gosh.
And he looked at me, he said, I forgive you.
I told her, I said, Jennifer, I forgive you. I don't want you to look over your shoulder. That I just want us to be happy and move on in life.
The minute he forgave me, it's like my heart physically started to heal. And I thought, this is what grace and mercy is all about. This is what they teach you in church that none of us ever get. And here was this man that I had hated I used to pray every day of my life during those 11 years that he would die, that he would be raped in prison and someone would kill him in prison. That was my prayer to God. And here was this man who, with grace and mercy, just forgave me.
That is overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
How wrong I was and how good he is.
How is it that Jennifer could have studied her rapist so carefully and still made this mistake? And how could she have failed to recognize Bobby Poole, the actual rapist, when he sat right in front of her in the courtroom 3 years later? That part of the story when we come back.
The story will continue after this.
Now that DNA has exonerated more than 230 men, mostly in sex crimes and murder cases, criminologists have been able to go back and study what went wrong in those investigations. What they've honed in on is faulty eyewitness testimony. Over 75% of these innocent men were convicted in part because an eyewitness fingered the wrong person. At the heart of the problem is the fragility of memory. As one researcher told us, we now know that memory is not like a videotape recorder. You don't just record an event and play it back. Instead, memory is malleable, full of holes, easily contaminated and susceptible to suggestion, as in the case of Jennifer Thompson and Ronald Cotton.
Before this case, did you think that there were a lot of innocent people put away?
No.
You didn't?
No, I didn't. Innocent people aren't convicted of crimes they didn't commit. I believe that.
What do you think now?
Oh, I know better. I mean, well over 200 cases nationally. We've had a half a dozen in this state alone. The first, of course, was my case.
Hallelujah! And as these innocent men have been freed in one state after the next, we've learned something else, that in all the cases where eyewitnesses were wrong, the real perpetrator was not in the initial lineup.
When you're sitting in front of a photo lineup, you just assume one of these guys is the suspect. It's my job to find it.
And Jennifer did her job. She found the suspect's photo. Problem is, the suspect, Ronald Cotton, was not the rapist.
Bobby Poole's photograph was not in the photo lineup.
Right.
He was not in the physical lineup.
When the real perpetrator is not in the set, is none of them, witnesses have a very difficult time being able to recognize that.
Gary Wells, a professor of psychology at Iowa State University, has been studying eyewitness memory for 30 years. He says when the real guy isn't there, witnesses tend to pick the person who looks most like him.
I think that Ronald Cotton and Bobby Poole look very much alike. They have very similar lips, shape of their eyes, their eyebrows kind of go up in a look of surprise.
Yes. Without him in the lineup, Ronald Cotton was the one who was in jeopardy.
Wells says eyewitness testimony has two key properties. One, it's often unreliable, and two, it is highly persuasive to jurors.
I can see why it's so persuasive. Someone says, I was there. You'd believe that person.
You believe that person because they have no reason to lie.
Yeah.
The legal system is set up to kind of sort between liars and truth tellers, and it's actually pretty good at that. But when someone is genuinely mistaken, the legal system doesn't really know how to deal with that, and we're talking about a genuine error here.
He walked us through what went wrong, some of it counterintuitive. When Jennifer spent 5 minutes studying the photographs, she and Detective Galden thought she was being careful.
I didn't want to come across, I don't think, as somebody who was like, that's the one. I really wanted to be sure.
Wells says no good.
Recognition memory is actually quite rapid. So we find in our studies, for example, that if somebody's taking longer than 10, 15 seconds, it's quite likely that they're doing something other than just using a reliable recognition memory.
So you're saying if she really recognized the guy, it would have been almost instantaneous.
Quite quick, yes.
He says a better way would have been to show Jennifer lineup photos or people one at a time, so that she would compare each one directly to her memory rather than to one another. Wells showed me a study in which more than 300 subjects were shown deliberately shaky videotape of a simulated crime.
You look out a window and you see some suspicious behavior. What happens is we tell them later then, this person that you saw right there put a bomb down the air shaft there.
Then subjects are shown a lineup and asked to identify the bomber.
That would be so hard. And
Very
I
difficult.
just saw it.
And of course, you're particularly cautious right now. You know now, after we've talked, probably not to pick anyone.
No, actually, I actually know who it is because if I had come upon that, I think it's this guy. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. And I'm already saying how hard it is.
It's none of them.
It's not.
And it's so, and you
Isn't
know
that
about
bizarre?
it. You know about this. We've talked about this. So this is the this is what makes it so difficult.
Look what you just did to me.
Yeah.
I'm mortified. I feel like Jennifer.
Wells says in real life, the mistake is often compounded by what happens next. Remember the seemingly innocent information Jennifer says she got from police after she picked Ronald Cotton out of the physical lineup?
That's the same person you picked out in the photo lineup. So in my mind, I thought, bingo, I did it right.
Wells studied what that reinforcement does. After half his subjects did what I did, picked an innocent person from this lineup, he told them nothing, then asked them questions about what they had seen. Very few felt highly confident about their choice.
Only about 4% are saying they had a great view, which is good because we gave them a lousy view. Only about 3% are saying they make out details of the face. That also is good because they really couldn't.
But he told a second group of subjects, after they made the same incorrect choices, good, you pick the suspect.
Now what happens is almost 45% of witnesses now report that they were positive or nearly positive. Notice that over 1/4 of them now say they had a great view. And
This is really what happened to Jennifer.
it is what happened with
Yeah.
Jennifer.
What this seems to be saying is that a reinforcement alters memory
It does.
dramatically.
It does.
He says the solution is to have someone independent administer the lineup, someone who doesn't even know who the suspect is, and certainly not the detective on the case.
You shouldn't have been there.
I shouldn't have been there.
No, but nobody did anything wrong. I mean, that
Well,
was
no,
the
that
practice.
was the common practice
Yeah.
then. It was the tradition. It was how it was done then. Law enforcement wasn't schooled in memory. We weren't schooled in protecting memory. treating it like a crime scene, where you're very careful, methodical about what you do and how you use it. I mean, we weren't taught that in those days.
But none of these errors explains perhaps the most puzzling part of this story, how it is that Jennifer could see Bobby Poole in the courtroom and not realize her mistake.
You're looking into the face of the man who raped you, whose face you had studied so intently.
Yes.
And there's no flicker, nothing between you and Bobby Poole.
Nothing. Nothing. And I've gone back there many times trying to think, was there ever a moment? Did I ever look at him and think, and I didn't.
Elizabeth Loftus is a professor of psychology and law at the University of California, Irvine, and an expert in memory. She showed me an experiment she says might help explain Jennifer's mistake. She asked me to study these faces. Then, after a few minutes, she gave me a memory test.
Which of these two faces do you recognize?
Right.
Okay, you picked right.
Left.
You picked left.
And
Okay.
I said left, but I wasn't 100% sure.
And then, the tricky part.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you why I'm stymied. Because I just picked this one on the left 2 seconds ago. But now I'm not sure, because those two look very much alike to me. But I'm going to tell you the left.
But I was wrong. It was the one on the right. Loftus explained how I had been duped.
You saw this face, then I gave you a test where I presented you with an altered face, along with a novel one. So I pretty much induced you to pick a wrong face because I don't even have the real guy there. It's an altered version. And later on, when you now have a choice between the altered one and the real one, you stuck with your altered left choice.
This is exactly what happened to Jennifer.
This can help us understand why Jennifer can be sitting in a courtroom and be looking at Bobby Poole, the original rapist, and looking at Ronald Cotton and saying, no, it's not Poole, it's Cotton, because she has been picking him all along.
I begin to wonder whether there should ever be eyewitness testimony in trials.
Well,
because of the tricks that memory plays.
yeah. I think what's important, though, is to understand that, know it as a police officer, as an investigator, as attorneys.
We need eyewitnesses. I mean, if we couldn't convict based on an eyewitness, that's giving a lot of comfort to criminals. We have no choice. We have to find ways to make this evidence better.
And that's something Jennifer has tried to do ever since by telling her story to prosecutors, police, defense attorneys, and she's had some success. Her state, North Carolina, was the first in the country to mandate reforms by law, showing victims lineup photos one at a time and emphasizing that the right answer may be none of the above. Having lineups conducted by a person who doesn't know who the suspect is, or not by a person at all.
The person who committed the crime may or may not be included.
One system now used in a handful of cities is computer software Mike Galden helped develop to have a laptop conduct photo lineups.
Does this person look familiar to you?
But law professor Rich Rosen says that in the vast majority of places there's been no reform, and that needs to change.
This is something that police officers can and should be in favor of.
Because you're not getting the real guy off the street.
Yeah, Bobby Poole raped other women because they went after Ron Cotton. So Ron is not the only person who suffered from this mistake.
Ronald Cotton, now 47 years old, has worked hard to rebuild his life. He works the late shift in a factory. He's been married for 12 years and has a 10-year-old daughter. They live in a house paid for with money North Carolina paid him in restitution, $10,000 for each of the 11 years he spent in prison. When he can, he joins Jennifer in her campaign for reforms. One of the most amazing things to have come out of this miscarriage of justice is the most unlikely of friendships. Jennifer and Ron say they speak on the phone about once a week,
They're families of friends. They say they have a shared bond that is hard for most people to fathom.
Have people ever met you for the first time when you're together and said kind of cheerily, hey, how did you two meet?
Yeah.
They
We
have?
did it on the airplane a lot.
Oh, yeah.
We're traveling. And I usually just go, you tell them.
Well, what do
know.
you say?
We would look at each other and laugh, you know, and finally we go ahead
And tell them.
And they have recently co-authored a book in hopes that their story can inform and inspire others.
Today, when you think about what happened to you that night when you were 22 years old, whose face is there?
Nobody's.
Oh my.
That to me is one of the most beautiful things, is I don't have a face. Bobby Poole's dead. I don't ever have to worry about him ever hurting another woman. He died in prison. And Ronald Cotton is my friend.